At 82 years old, Cary Grant Fenella says, she was the love of his life. Cary Grant was born Archibald Alexander Leach on January 18, 1904 in Bristol, England. Grant's early life was filled with hard times and sad feelings. He grew up without much money, and something really painful happened when his mother, Elsie, was sent to a mental hospital when he was just 9 years old. His father hid this from him for many years by saying she had gone away. This terrible loss stayed with Grant forever, affecting his inner thoughts and helping create the deep emotions that would later make Heist's acting performances so special. As a young man, he found comfort in movement and hard work. Joining Bob Pender's group of acrobats, traveling with the team not only made him graceful and gave him perfecting, but also taught him to be professional and pay attention to very little detail. Grant moved to America in the early 1920s and eventually made his way to Hollywood. After signing with Paramount Pictures, he slowly changed himself, making his accent smoother, improving his posture, and creating the cool, smooth personality that would become what everyone knew him for. But behind the easy charm was a hard worker who read scripts carefully and pushed for creative control long before it was normal for actors to do that. By the mid-1930s, Cary Grant had become a leading man, winning over audiences with his mix of class, comedy skills, and quiet strength. What truly made Cary Grant special was his ability to do many different things. He moved easily between silly comedies, romantic dramas, and scary thrillers, often changing the movie types themselves. In films like Bringing Up Baby, His Girl Friday, and The Philadelphia Story, he showed comic timing so perfect it seemed natural. But it was really based in smarts and knowing himself. Grant was never afraid to make himself look silly, and being willing to appear weak or foolish only made people like him more. His performance with Katharine Hepburn, Rosalind Russell, and Irene Dunne remain perfect examples of movie chemistry. Just as important was his famous work with director Alfred Hitchcock. In classics like Suspicion, Notorious, To Catch a Thief, and North by Northwest, Grant showed a calm, controlled outside while quietly showing inner worry and morale questions. He became the perfect Hitchcock hero, charming but maybe dangerous, trustworthy but mysterious. These roles expanded what was possible for the leading man role and showed Grant's ability to balance lightness with darkness, humor with danger. Even though he was nominated twice for the Academy Award for Best Actor, Grant never won in competition, something often called one of Hollywood's biggest mistakes. However, in 1970, he was given an honorary Oscar as recognition of his amazing contributions. 2 movies. By then, his legacy was already solid. He had stopped acting in 1966, choosing to leave gracefully rather than stay long, and spent his later years in business projects and raising his daughter Jennifer, whom he loved deeply. In the mid-1950s, at the peak of his fame, but restless with just being a leading man for hire, he took a big step toward creative independence by starting his own production company, Granart Productions. This move marked a turning point in his career, giving him more artistic control and the freedom to shape stories that showed his changing taste and growth. Under the Granart name, he helped create some of the most sophisticated and lasting films of his later years. Among them was Indiscreet, 1958, a sparkling romantic comedy that showed his easy charm and perfect timing, and Father Goose, 1964, a warm, funny film that showed a gentler, more thoughtful side of his screen personality. These projects were not just money-making ventures. They were carefully picked works that showed his desire to grow beyond the limits of traditional Hollywood stardom and leave behind films of lasting quality and cleverness. But, for all his professional success and creative happiness, a far more important role was about to change his life. In 1966, following the birth of his beloved daughter, Jennifer, he made a decision that surprised many and quietly touched those who knew him well. He chose to step away from acting in movies entirely, turning his back on the glamour, fame, and demands of Hollywood to give himself to being a father. This was not a retreat because of tiredness or fading fame, but a deeply personal choice based on love and duty, determined to give his daughter Thestable caring upbringing he himself had missed. He embraced home life with the same dedication and grace that had defined his career. In doing so, has showed that his greatest performance is not on screen, but in the private, uncelebrated role of a loving parent, one that ultimately became the most meaningful chapter of his life. Cary Grant's romantic life was as interesting and headline-making as the roles he played on screen. Happen a Grey Tekkas in a series of Maria's set showed both the glamour and the emotional complexity of Hollywood's golden age. In 1942, at the height of his movie stardom, Grant married Barbara Hutton, the Woolworth heiress, and one of the wealthiest women in the world. Their reunion instantly became one of the most talked about marriages of the time. A dazzling pairing of movie charm and huge fortune. Though their relationship eventually ended in divorce, it was notably free of anger. Remarkably, for a Hollywood marriage under such intense public attention, Grant and Hutton remained friends afterward. Proof of the mutual respect and love that stayed. Even after their romantic bond ended, on Christmas Day in 1949, Grant married actress and writer Betsy Drake, marking what many people considered one of the most mentally compatible relationships of his life. Drake shared Grant's interest in psychology and personal growth, and the two even appeared on screen in Every Girl Should Be Married, 1948, and Room for One More, 1952. Their marriage represented a quieter, more thoughtful chapter for Grant, one focused on understanding himself rather than tabloid drama. Despite the deep connection they shared, the marriage ended on August 14, 1962, closing a big and important period in his personal life. Grant's next marriage captured public attention for its suddenness and difference. On July 22, 1965, he eloped with actress Diane Cannon, Hayos, more than 3 decades younger than him. Their quick romance fascinated the press, symbolizing both Grant's lasting appeal and Hollywood substance with age-defying love stories. However, the relationship proved rocky and the couple divorced in 1968, despite the challenges his marriage brought. Grant one of the most meaningful roles of his life, fatherhood, which deeply reshaped his priorities and outlook in his later years. Finally, on April 11, 1981, Cary Grant married Barbara Harris, a woman 47 years his junior. This last marriage came long after he had stepped away from the spotlight, and it showed a desire for friendship and stability rather than celebrity romance. With Harris, Grant found a sense of peace and privacy that had often escaped him earlier in life, bringing his long and eventful journey through love to a quiet, settled ending. Together, these marriages paint a picture of a man who, beneath his easy, elegant-scened, smooth-screen personality, was constantly searching for connection, understanding, and lasting love, making Cary Grant's personal life every bit as interesting as his legendary film career. At 82 years old, long after the camera sheds stopped rolling and the public image of easy charm had softened in quiet thinking, Cary Grant finally allowed himself to speak the truth he had protected for decades. The man who had been married 5 times, who had shared his life with some of the most beautifully accomplished women in the world, made a confession that surprised even those closest to him. In the final years of his life, Grant revealed that there was a woman who stood above all others, the great Italian actress Sophia Loren. For most of his career, Cary Grant was a picture of romantic perfection. On screen, he made love look graceful, playful, and timeless. Off-screen, however, his emotional life was far more complicated. He often spoke about how fame, insecurity, and his own constant self-criticism made it difficult for him to fully open up in relationships. "I spent much of my life pretending to be Sumione, who had everything figured out," Grant once said. "But the truth is, I was always searching for something or Sumione who made me feel complete. That feeling," he said, "came when he met Sophia Loren." Their paths crossed in the late 1950s while filming The Pride and the Passion. 1957. Grant was already a legendary Hollywood star. Loren was a rising international cingeunches radiating beauty, intelligence, and confidence. From the moment they met, Grant felt something he had never experienced before. "She didn't look at me as Cary Grant, the movie star," he remembered. "She looked at me as a man, flawed, human, and real. That scared me. And it excited me at the same time." Grant was deeply attracted to Loren's realness, unlike the carefully constructed Hollywood world he lived in. She wasn't apologetically herself, passionate, hardworking, warm, and rooted in her Italian background. "Sophia had a strength that didn't need to announce itself," he said. "She carried herself with dignity and fire, and I was completely undone by it." He admitted that he fell in love with her, quietly but intensely, knowing all the while that circumstances stood firmly in the way. At the time, Loren was emotionally committed to producer Carlo Ponti, a man she loved deeply and would later marry. Grant, despite his fame and confidence, understood that her heart already belonged elsewhere. "I knew she would never be mine," he said softly. "But loving her changed me. It showed me the kind of love that exists beyond owning someone." Rather than anger, Grant felt admiration, even thankfulness, for having known her at all. "What made this love so lasting," Grant explained, "was that it was never ruined by anger or disappointment. We didn't destroy what we felt by trying to force it into something it could never be," he thought back. "That's why it stayed pure in my memory." Over the years, he had marriages, heartbreaks, and personal struggles. Yet, the emotional clarity he felt with Loren remained unmatched. In his final years, Grant often thought about the difference between companionship and true connection. "I cared deeply for the women I married," he said. "But Sophia, she represented the love I understood too late. The love that asks for nothing, that simply exists." His confession was not an attempt to rewrite history or make his past relationships smaller, but rather to acknowledge a truth he had long carried silently. When Cary Grant spoke of Sophia Loren at 82, there was no regret in his voice, only gentleness. "If you're lucky," he said, "you meet one person in your life who shows you who you really are. For me, that was Sophia. She was the love of my life, even if she was never meant to be my wife." In that quiet admission, the world glimpsed the man behind the legend. Not the perfectly dressed star, but a thoughtful soul who finally allowed himself to name the love that had shaped his heart forever. Cary Grant passed away on November 29, 1986, after suffering a massive stroke. And with his death, the world lost not only one of Hollywood's great stars, but also a symbol of elegance, wit, and timeless charm. At the time, Grant was 82 years old, and remarkably still very much engaged with life. Rather than fading quietly into hiding, he had continued to appear at public events, and remained warmly connected to the fans who had loved him for more than 5 decades. His sudden passing, therefore, came as a hageshek, made even more sad by the circumstances surrounding it. Grant was in Davenport, Iowa, preparing to give a talk as part of a national speaking tour. These appearances had become an important part of his later years, letting him reflect on his extraordinary life, share stories from Hollywood's golden age, and express thanks for a career that had exceeded even his own youthful dreams. On the evening before his death, he had attended a rehearsal dinner for the event, and appeared, by most accounts, to be in good spirits, kind, funny, and perfectly polite as Hellway's was. It was a sad irony that Eamon, who had represented energy and sophistication, for so long would be taken so suddenly. With no opportunity for goodbye, the massive stroke struck without warning, showing the fragility of life, even for those who seem almost immortal in the public imagination. Grant was rushed to St. Luke's Hospital, but despite medical efforts, he never woke up. News of his death spread quickly, causing a new pouring of sadness from around throughout. Fans, fellow actors, directors, and critics alike mourned the loss of Eamon, whose screen presence had shaped generations of movie lovers. For many, it felt as though an entire era of Hollywood had come to a close.